Welcome. You're officially locked into Persuasions of Comfort. I am your host, Naum. I want to give a big shout out to all the listeners out there who've been tuning in since day one. The love and support is 100% greatly appreciated. Let's get it. The topic of discussion for today revolves around learning to pivot strategically. Now, a pivot made out of panic can look just like progress until the dust settles. In the last episode, I talked about what it really means to pivot and how it's not about giving up, but realigning with purpose. In this episode, I want to dig a little deeper because not every pivot is productive. Some are emotional reactions dressed up as strategy. Others are fueled by ideas or dreams that don't actually belong to us. So the takeaway I want to emphasize does not only revolve around or involve learning how to pivot strategically, but doing so with intention, alignment, and direction. So I want to talk about the difference between reacting and repositioning. When things don't go as planned, the urge to move or do something productive can sometimes feel like progress. But movement without direction is just motion. One of my favorite quotes from Denzel Washington: "Do not confuse movement with progress, because you could be running in place and going nowhere." Strategic pivots start with a pause, not panic. Strategic pivots require reflection. What's really working and what's not? What is the goal and what's just a dream? What are the methods and strategies that you're using? And what is your mindset? A strategic pivot begins with stillness, not speed. So ask yourself, am I pivoting to escape discomfort? Or am I pivoting to expand into purpose? A while ago, I did an episode titled X Cubed, State Story Strategy. I also used this method in a workshop, a financial workshop, where I collaborated with a financial advisor to use the same framework when it comes to building out financial plans for the year. Before any shift, you want to check your state of mind. You want to challenge your story and define your strategy. So what is state? State means that you are making this decision from peace, not pressure. I mean, sometimes pressure is cool, because essentially, a lot of us are able to make moves when our backs are against the wall. We're able to do our best work when pressure begins to build. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But essentially, deep down, if you do your best work when you're pressured, essentially, you are feeling a sense of peace, right? What is story? Story is the narrative that you're telling yourself about this pivot. What limiting beliefs are you telling yourself as you're going through this change, this transformation, this phase, this transition? And finally, strategy. What is the desired outcome? And what are the resources or relationships that you can use to support it? Your pivot should be rooted in clarity, not confusion. When all three are aligned, state, story, strategy, your next move becomes an extension of who you're becoming and not just what you're avoiding. So this kind of ties into what I call micro pivots. Big shifts rarely happen overnight. Strategy, or should I say strategic pivots, happen in stages. One of the best advice I received in my early career as a software engineer is to code a little and test a lot. One of the biggest mistakes that anyone can make is to take an action moving forward and realizing that your approach and your direction was way off. Right. Of course. The goal of life is to live and learn and not to make the same mistakes over and over. But the best way to hedge against this common mistake that we all make is before changing direction completely, test small shifts. Have a conversation. Build a prototype. Conduct a week-long trial before committing all the way. A major pivot can be discouraging and uncomfortable. And most of all, it can be damaging to the momentum that you've already worked so hard to build. So these micro pivots, as I call them, can be viewed as status checks, providing feedback without risking full collapse. Testing your direction before you change your destination can be a huge asset to whatever goal you're looking to accomplish. These tests, they protect your momentum while you learn, adjust, and refine the process. Okay, story time. A few years back, I was working on a particular project and it looked great on paper. The kind of thing where, people nod and say, yeah, you're doing something. This is working out. Good job. But something felt off. Like I said, the numbers were looking fine. Engagement was steady. And yet I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was climbing a ladder and leaning on the wrong wall. It's like pushing a rock up a hill. Instead of scraping the project overnight, I started small. I started testing new ideas, started asking the right questions, gathered honest feedback, and adjusting the message that I was telling myself. Ideally, I focused on micro pivots. Within months, I discovered the version of the project that actually fit the need I was looking for. Looking back, the old me probably would have just scraped it and started all over, and that would have just put me behind a few months. Throughout this process, I realized that success is usually the only thing that matters, right? But that's not true. What actually fuels or powers or drives the success is the strategy you build behind the process that leads to that success, right? No matter what level that you're on, the principle has to stay the same. Most of us look at velocity to be a key metric in measuring whether progress is being made, whether you're actually being successful. And it works for a certain amount of time and for certain projects, cool. You can for sure make the claim that you're learning throughout that process and determining what works and what doesn't work. However, I found satisfaction in knowing that these micro pivots assisted me in adjusting along the way while moving in the right direction. I'll repeat that. I found satisfaction in knowing that the micro pivots that I was applying assisted me in adjusting along the way while staying and moving in the right direction. The pivot didn't just save the idea I was working on, it reshaped the identity behind it. So here are some reflection questions where you can pause and reflect. What's one area of your life or work where you're reacting instead of repositioning? How could a micro pivot help you test a new direction before fully committing? And the last one, which part of the S cubed state story strategy needs recalibration before your next move? One thing I want to emphasize with these reflection questions as you think about them and answer them honestly is that every pivot is an experiment in alignment. The strategy is simply the structure that keeps you grounded while you grow. So if this episode inspired you in any way, I challenge you to take one area of your life this week and identify one small micro pivot that you can make. It could be how you approach your mornings, your projects, even your relationships. Leave a comment on the episode if you feel inclined to share with others or with me what micro pivot worked for you. Next up, understanding when to pivot. In this episode, I talk about timing and how to recognize when discomfort is growth versus when it's a sign to change direction. Knowing when to move is just as important as knowing how. I am your host. Till next time, Naum.